Rustic Aquariumax here. I have just redone the dart frog tank, and we're going to do a dart frog feeding in just a little while. But first, it is time to address Patreon questions. So while I'm waiting for people to pop into the chat, since I didn't give anybody any warning for this one, I'm going to open up the Patreon and answer a question. This was a question from Scott and Tony. And the question was, "Hey Russ, I have a question about moving an established herd to a larger enclosure," talking about isopods. "As I've mentioned before, my cows are quickly outgrowing the Isoviva enclosure and I need to give them larger digs, but I'm not sure about the best way to do it. Do I just dump the old substrate in the new enclosure and add additional substrate, or is there a better way? Not sure if this is worthy of a live stream or not, but that's my question." And I think that is perfectly worthy of a live stream, so I'm going to go ahead and answer that. Looks like he's in the house right now, so Moultrie Geeks, thanks for joining in right away, and I'm going to answer your question. So I just read it out loud. I don't know if you heard it yet, but I am going to answer it. So, to move isopods when you already have an existing enclosure with existing substrate, what I like to do is prepare substrate in the destination, the larger destination enclosure, have that all ready, but have it be 1/2 to 2/3 to 3/4 of the enclosure with substrate, and then put nothing in that other area. And then I will take the surface decor, the leaf litter layer, the moss layer, and all of that, any wood structures you have in there, rocks and whatnot, and move that into the destination enclosure and put it on the surface of the substrate along with a layer of leaf litter. Put it on top of the layer of leaf litter, so that's all good to go. And then, remove as many isopods as I can, usually at that point as well. And then I will put the existing substrate I already had in the empty portion of the isopod container. And then that way they have familiar substrate that is well colonized with beneficial fungi, microorganisms and so on, as well as springtails to get the culture going. But they also have a bunch of new substrate and a lot more space. So that is my preferred way of doing it, and I think that should work for you with your dairy cows really well. And let me know, Moultrie Geeks, what you think. Hopefully that helps you out. Okay, so let's see who's in the house. We got Ty. I can't go all the way back to the beginning of the chat for whatever reason, but Calcanort. And you just got the notice right in time, which is great. Austin Gregory, Captain Obvious, Mr. E. Finn, Sheena McGee, Genevieve Nickens, Heather Jensen. Okay, cool. So Heather Jensen says, "I sent you plans for your desert tank. Should be there by Saturday." Awesome. Look forward to playing with that. Really appreciate that. Moultrie Geeks. Okay, it sounds like that was the answer. That was the level of detail you were hoping for, I hope. Sorry about the glare. The glare is kind of nasty in here. Play around with that a little bit, see if I can adjust. That's even worse. Yeah, we'll see what I can do. Let's see. My house is really cold, but really want dart frogs. What heating can you use for dart frogs? How cold is your house? Because, excuse me, sorry about that. If it's not, if it's above 68, that's probably good. The lighting will tend to warm up the tank a little bit, not a lot, but the fact that there's light going in and there's not a lot of ventilation in a dart frog enclosure will make a bit of a difference. You may or may not have to heat them depending on the temperature in your house. I'm going to go ahead and put some fruit flies in here so we can get these guys to come out. And I want to showcase, these are all melanogaster wingless, or Apteris fruit flies that I just put here in front of this cocoa hut. They now have 2 cocoa huts in here, which I'm excited about because I'll probably get more tadpoles. There's one under here, but it's really hard to access. And there's roots from the bromeliad up above, which is a gorgeous plant, but it's all kind of clogging it up and making it impossible to get in there. So I put another one in there with a petri dish under it in an effort to get them to breed a little bit more accessibly. All right, and let's see, I thought I saw a message from Captain Obvious, but, okay. And And Calcanor, yeah. I don't recommend a lamp. The light I was talking about is this kind of light. It's just an LED light that I'm using to light the plants. I would never recommend a heat lamp, per se, above dart frogs. I'm just saying that a lamp like this, even though it is an LED, does cause some trapped heat. So that's what I'm talking about. So I hope that makes sense. I want to clarify, I would not recommend a heat lamp at all for dart frogs, ever. Matt M. So Matt M. wasn't sure the best way to contact you, email or contact you through the website, but I was wondering if you received my email from yesterday. Thanks. Well, Matt, remind me just the general topic of your email. I did respond to some emails yesterday. If I haven't responded, though, I likely did not get it. You can try Instagram if that doesn't work, and we'll see how that goes. But I want to make sure I respond to you. I don't recall what the topic was. Okay, so Calcanort, can you explain wingless and flightless fruit fly difference? I had one that got too hot and they started flying. Okay, so there are a couple of things going on in the dart frog hobby. There are several different strains of fruit flies. The main two species of fruit flies. I'm going to see if I can show you this guy. He's up here in the corner, which is kind of fun. This is my male right here. The glare is actually not that bad from here. It's kind of fun that they use the whole enclosure. Love that. Anyway, there are two species, main species, but different types of those species. And there are hydei, Drosophila hydei, which is the larger species which has wings, and those wings are non-functional in most cases. They can't use them. Once in a very great while, you may get a mutation which reverts back to the wild type, but it's not common. And what generally happens when people find flighted fruit flies in their enclosures, the genes that regulate the functionality of the wings is just a single gene recessive trait, and if a wild fly happens to get in there, and there are wild hydei all over the place, if one happens to get in there and mates with a flightless one, meaning it has wings but can't fly, it's flightless, then they will produce a whole bunch of flighted ones, and that often happens, and people think it's something else going on, but it's generally just that. There are also the Drosophila melanogaster, and there are several strains out there, and one of the strains, it has been said that if they're kept warm enough, they will revert back to the wild type. But in my experience, I've kept some fruit flies pretty warm and they do not revert. But what happens is sometimes, again, you'll get a wild melanogaster in your enclosure of the flies in the deli cup, and then they will start breeding the same way, single gene recessive trait. So the dominant winged trait will come through, and you'll get flighted fruit flies coming out of your culture. So that's what's usually happening. I'm not going to rule out anything else, but that seems to be what's going on in most of those cases. There are other possibilities as well, but that seems to be what's going on. Because I have kept fruit flies well over 80 degrees in the summer, where they're reaching temperatures like that and not had any problems. So basically, in a nutshell, flightless means they have wings and can't use them properly. Wingless means the wings don't actually develop. And vestigial winged fruit flies have very knob-like wings that don't do anything, but they don't really look like wings anymore. Ah, that's cool. I love that your toad is hanging out in your tiki planter. Okay. So, Mr. Efin, do you know more about feather-tail centipedes? I've never kept any Alipes species, so I know just what I've read about them, which is not a lot. Okay, and no problem, Calcanort. I just wanted to make sure I was being really clear that the lamp was, I wasn't suggesting a heat lamp, and I figured that you weren't saying I was using one, but I just wanted to make certain that nobody thought I meant actually a heat lamp on the frogs, because that would be bad. So this light is actually, this is a Tinkman herp bulb from the Biodude, and I really like it. It's a good bulb. Hello, Crystal's Pets and Plants. Austin Gregory, can I use a wooden vivarium for dart frogs to insulate the heat? It's the most forgiving dart frog species for temps. I wouldn't recommend a wooden one just because whatever treating you're going to have to do to that wood to keep it from rotting with all the moisture that you're going to be dealing with is going to be potentially toxic and probably not extraordinarily permanent. I mean, if you painted it with marine epoxy, but then you're missing out on the visibility of the frogs. So I would say just go with the glass, and the glass is going to give some insulation, but how cold does it get in your house? Because you may not need to worry about it. I mean, these guys have gone down to 65. I would say this is actually the leucomelis, this species, Dendrobates leucomelis, is one of the most forgiving species. They can go from about 65 to 85-ish. You don't want to keep them at 85 for a long time, but they can do it. Oh, okay. You know what, Matt? I remember reading your email and being interrupted, and then I forgot to get back to it. So just, if you wouldn't mind just sending me another one, because I get a lot of emails, as you might imagine, and sometimes if I don't get to it, I try really hard, but there's so many. So go ahead and send me one. I do have some morning geckos available. So let's talk. I have more than you need. I remember you said you were looking for 2, and I've got at least 5 or 6 available, so we can make it work, I think. And Mr. Ethan, you saw it eat a springtail. Cool. Yeah, there are springtails in here. There are isopods in here, so they get various snacks. That's cool. And Captain Obvious says, I always thought dart frogs didn't climb until I went to a shop and saw a tank with every dart frog on the gap of a background. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I designed this vivarium specifically with all the cork bark so that they had stairs, basically, that could climb up all the way to the top, and they do. They're all the way up in the back and doing all that kind of stuff. You may have noticed this looks a lot different from the time you saw it. I had to cut things way back because they were going nuts, and I put a bunch of stuff in a crusty vivarium to see if I can get it to grow there. But the original bromeliad that this pup is from passed away, because that's what they do eventually after they pup, and this is the second time it had pupped. So I saved the pup, and the other one was, the parent was gone. This is a pup from this big old bromeliad here. And then this one is starting to pup. There's some little stolons or suckers. You can see one maybe down at the bottom there. So yeah. Let's see. I'm scrolling back up to try to catch up with the text. Okay. Okay, Austin, if your house gets below 0 degrees in winter, like 0 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit, even then, I mean, either way, you're going to need some supplemental heating of some sort. And you might want to do a heat pad on the side or something. But even with that, if your house gets that cold, I wouldn't get your dart frogs until you've gone through an entire winter and monitoring the temps of that vivarium and seeing what the minimum is. And if it's anywhere near the danger zone, just don't get dart frogs until you can adjust things. That's what I would say. Mike Diamond. Oh, I'm glad you like these. And Mr. Efin, centipede confirmed it has passed away, lived out its natural lifespan. Sad thing, but yep, centipede has passed on. I was able to confirm that. It did wake up from brumation and was alive, but was not looking super great and died a couple of days later. Okay. Turbo Fish in the house. Nice to see you here. Okay, Heather Jensen. Apiscias, yes. I actually had Apiscias were one of the first plants that I kept in my morning gecko vivarium. I had one kind of Apiscia with kind of a reddish pink flower that I thought was pretty cool. It went nuts though, it like overtook my vivarium. And so I ended up getting rid of it, but I loved it. I mean, I thought it was beautiful and I loved the flowers. They're a beautiful plant. I would probably keep them again. I just might keep them in a larger vivarium than I started with at that point. Little Bob, good to see you. I'm sorry you can't stay longer. Probably gone by now, but maybe you'll catch the replay. So Slav Pepe, keeping larger species of frog. Which add an Amazon milk frog to my bioactive, and plants that might do well wouldn't get trampled. Well, I have not kept Amazon milk frogs, but I would say as long as you have enough space, I can recommend some plants that are pretty tough. Korean rock ferns are very bouncy, so they're resilient to things crushing them. They'll bounce back. A lemon button fern, same thing. Bird's nest fern, same thing. And sansevierias are all pretty tough plants that you could look at, that you could keep with Amazon milk frogs. Okay, let's see. Can we see the zebra isopods? Maybe. We'll see. I'm working on... I wanted to ask everybody about the microphone. That reminds me, because I'm on a shorter microphone today. And I'm not in the same room as the zebra, so I'd have to move around. But that's not out of the realm of possibility. We'll see. But I wanted to ask, how's the microphone sounding today? Because this is the new microphone that came in, the replacement. Came in for my other one. So let me know how that goes. And Mike Diamond, it is true that captive bred dart frogs are not toxic because the toxins actually are sequestered from food items, from various invertebrates that they eat. And so they think maybe various ants, millipedes, mites, whatnot, have these toxins and they collect them that way. And so even a wild caught dart frog kept in captivity long enough will eventually lose the toxins on a captive diet. So yes, captive dart frogs have no trace of the toxin. Hey, Beetle King, welcome. Okay, good. Heather Jensen saying the microphone's working. Beetle King saying it's working. Efin. Okay, great. That's awesome. Glad to hear the microphone's working better. And Lone Aquarist. Okay, I don't actually have any thumbnail darts. The only darts I have are these guys. These are my Dendrobates leucomelis, a little too big to be thumbnail darts. But I think most darts are really good in the mid 70s Fahrenheit is a generally good temperature. This is what I try to keep these guys at. They do get a little bit warmer in the summer, maybe a little cooler in the winter, but these, like I said, these are one of the most tolerant dart frogs. Love this. Check them out. Scaling the cork bark tree stump. Oh, let me jump down. Okay. Well, it's fun. I like it. I like it. Okay, well, thank you everyone for the feedback on the microphone. Really glad it's sounding better. One thing I love about these guys is you can tell who's who just by the pattern. I know this is the male just by looking at his pattern. I had to figure out who he was, which one was the male by who was calling, and memorizing the pattern. And that's basically what I did. Okay, and thank you, Abby. I just redid it. I just redid the enclosure. It looks a little less heavily planted than before, a little less wild, and though I like the wild, I kind of feel refreshed by this, so I'm kind of enjoying how it looks here like this. So I appreciate that, Abby. Lone Aquarist, using equipment to control temperature. Well, in a sense I do. There's no equipment attached to the actual vivarium that controls the temperature. It's just the climate control we have for the house, which is a swamp cooler. So in the winter, we don't use it, of course, so we use central heating, and we usually heat the house to the high 60s to low 70s in the winter, and then in the summer we try to keep it down to about 78 in the summer, no higher than that usually. Now, what I have is some passive evaporative cooling, because I have this is a vent. This is very, very fine mesh fabric here, like chiffon fine, but stronger, that I had a professional window guy make actually for me. It cost me quite a bit to do, but it was worth it. But anyway, what happens is, in a vivarium like this, when you have ventilation, I don't have a ton, but I have enough, there's some evaporative cooling going on. And so I'm always spraying this and putting water in, and it's always evaporating. This substrate down here is going to be cooler, several degrees cooler than the surrounding room when it's warm, just because of that evaporative cooling. So you can usually keep this in the low 70s. Even if the room spikes up to 80, 82 or something like that, it's going to be more like 76, 78 right on the surface of the leaves where they're hanging out because of that evaporative cooling. So that helps. Let's see. Ants, my baby cricket container. How do I get rid of them? Darn, that's a problem. Whew. I would try to take as many crickets out as I can in a reasonable manner, and then I would thoroughly clean the container out so that there are no ants in there anymore and put back what crickets I can. It's not a great solution, but that's what I would do. Sorry to hear that's happening. Okay, so do you think anyone keeps bumblebee millies and darts together? I wouldn't, and this is why. I wouldn't, because the toxins in the bumblebee millipedes might conceivably be at least distasteful to frogs, possibly harmful, or they might start sequestering them, and that wouldn't be great. And using those toxins in their skin, I'm not sure what that would work or not. So I don't know if anybody does. I know the aquarium, one of the local aquariums, we have 2 aquariums in the state, and one of them, the larger one, has the greenhouse millipedes in with their dart frogs. That's the closest I know of, and that seems to work for them. The Oxidus gracilis, I think the name is. Okay, so let's see. So, sorry, I'm trying to scroll back. Jack R., how much time do you say you spend working on this tank per day or week? Very, very little. These are super easy. I mean, occasionally I'll do, it took me probably half an hour to trim this, but I don't do it very often. I should do it at least once a month, and I don't, just to be honest. I trim it less often, and so it sometimes gets pretty wild. But as far as taking care of it, it should get a good misting, a 30-second to 2-minute misting once or twice a day. And then the dart frog should be fed every other day or so, which only takes, 2 or 3 minutes to put the calcium and stuff, collect the flies, put the calcium and or vitamin supplements, whatever I'm using for the day, on them, and then put them in. And then wiping down the glass takes about 30 seconds to a minute in the front. And I don't have to clean per se, other than cleaning the glass, because the isopods and springtails do that. So it's super easy, super easy. One of the easiest creatures to keep, honestly. They cost a fair bit to set up, but as far as, upkeep, they're super easy. And the light that I'm using this is a Tinkman Herp 22-inch LED bulb from the Bioactive. And let's see. What do I have separating the drainage layer from the substrate? This is just nylon window screen. I don't know if you can see it. It focused for a second. It's just nylon window screen. That's all it is. Works great. And what's your misting and lighting schedule? So ideally I would mist once or twice a day. Sometimes I skip a day if I see there's a lot of condensation in there. And then the light schedule is about a 12-hour on, 12-hour off. And yeah, Austin Gregory, we still have an axolotl, my daughter's axolotl. Very cool. We've had it for, I'm not sure how long now, but yeah, very cool. Fan blowing air in option 1. Okay. You can use a fan in a dart frog enclosure. It's totally fine. But you want a very small fan. Typically they use like the computer USB fans for computers. So it's a pretty low flow. And or you can have fan sucking air out. I think a good option, if you're going to do that, is put your vents up in the front of the tank, like up here, and then have the fan sucking air out, and then it pulls air past this, and it can help keep the front glass drier. But I just wipe down the glass. It seems fine. Oh yeah, so Quaxy FN. I would keep the crickets on a different substrate, like the egg crate, like Slav Pepe is saying. That makes it easier. Cole Helderman, looking at getting reptiles for a while now, and I think I've settled on garter snakes. Would you recommend them? By the way, love your videos. Well, thank you, Cole. Yes, I recommend garter snakes very heartily. I think they're one of the best pet snakes out there. I really adore my garter snakes, and I think they're great display snakes because you see them a lot during the day. They're great snakes for handling. They're a manageable size. You can keep them communally, which is super fun. And they have a lot of personality. They seem to be interested when you take them out. Some snakes, will just kind of sit there when you take them out, or some will be upset. But as long as you are careful with your garter snakes, mine seem to actually be interested in coming out and getting some exercise on my hands. They'll crawl right up to the front and just crawl right out of the tank. So, oh yeah, I recommend garter snakes very, very unreservedly. Let's put it that way. That's maybe not the right words, but let's see. Let's see. Sorry, I'm getting behind. Okay. The Crazy Crafter, hello. Do you have Madagascan hissing cockroaches? I just got some, but they're super little. How long till they grow up? That is a species I have some experience with, in that I worked with them in a zoo a long time ago in a display collection, like an educational collection. But I've never bred them, nor have I kept them personally in my house. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, though. And there was a snake at work, and I was just going to go move it, but my boss said she wouldn't head out work and call him if I got bit, so I couldn't go grab it. Wow. And it probably wasn't even a dangerous snake at all. But, you know, I know how that can be. Last time there was a snake that showed up at work, they called me, and it's a good thing, because I don't know what would have happened if someone else had been called. It turned out to be a very, very young western yellow-bellied racer, and I was able to rescue it, took it home, fed it up a little bit, kept it for a week or two to make sure it was doing okay, and then released it into its natural habitat. Why are fungus gnats bad for enclosures, amphibians, and isopods? What do they do? Well, fungus gnats by themselves are just annoying in most cases. They annoy people to death. I mean, because they get everywhere. They don't just stay in the vivariums. If they did, it wouldn't be that big of a deal maybe, but they get everywhere. They fly up your nose and, you know, all over, that kind of stuff, if you get too many of them. Oh, that's kind of fun. They're all hanging out right there, right on the cocoa hat. So the main problem is, beyond that, is that if the population gets too crazy, they can start eating other things. They'll get hungry enough, they'll start eating things they shouldn't, like attacking live things and eating plant roots and, you know, that kind of stuff. Possibly eating freshly molted creatures, so not good. So you definitely want to keep them under control. In a dart frog tank, they're generally not an issue because the dart frogs eat them. So they're just an extra little food item that shows up. Not a big deal, but and that's true with some other enclosures too, but not with all of them. With isopods, you know, the isopods aren't really going to eat them until the isopods, I think that the isopods, once they reach a certain population and are thriving in the enclosure enough, have a certain population density, critical mass, if you will, that they are eating the fungus gnat larvae and eggs. And so it's not that much of an issue, but until they get them going, it's not, you know, it's not going to work. So the Crazy Crafter, I want to know if you think dart frogs are good for beginners. Well, if you're ready to do the research on how to put everything together, and you're ready for the considerable expense that it takes to put an enclosure together, then yes. If you're not willing to shell out several $100 US to put an enclosure together, then no. It does cost a decent amount to make a decent enclosure. I would say bare bones enclosure, if you're getting some used stuff, but you're still doing everything you need to, you're probably going to look at least $200 and probably more. I mean, I spent more on this one than $200, I'll tell you that. But it's worth it to me. But you'd have to work, you have to put a lot of research and a lot of time into it, and some money. But if you're willing to do all those things, then yes. Do crickets eat baby crickets? Yes, they can, especially if they're extra hungry. But it depends on the species too. The normal house cricket in pet stores will eat a lot of babies, when they're really young especially. So Captain Obvious, an off-brand Gaboon viper. That sounds interesting. I love corn snakes, but gray corn snakes are not my favorite. I love the oranges and reds. My crested gecko will eat the springtails if I add them to my bioactive enclosure. Probably not wiggly whiskers. Your crested gecko probably won't bug the springtails much. They tend to ignore really small creatures, and in my experience, Crested geckos do fine with dwarf isopods like dwarf whites too. They seem to ignore them. They will eat bigger isopods sometimes. I've experimented with the orange Porcellio scabber, and they seem to eat all of them. I have experimented with dairy cow isopods with one of my crested gecko, and it seems to be going completely fine. It goes really well. He probably does pick some off, but they breed so fast it doesn't matter. And they get well fed enough so that he's not in danger. Okay, so Lone Aquarius, does my enclosure have a drain? This one doesn't, and I just have to be super careful. As you can see here, hopefully, you can see the water level comes to here right now, and that's a pretty good place for it to be. And you got this much gap here before. You never want this to get all the way up here, and it never has. If it were to get up there and I didn't have a drain, I'd be in trouble. I'd have to peel back all the substrate layers here and use a turkey baster or a siphon or something and pull out water. And I've had to do that in other enclosures on occasion, which is the alternative to having a drain. If you do have a standpipe that you install when you build it, you don't have to worry about it as much because you can just open it up and suck out water. Or you can put a drain in it, have it drilled, and that's pretty cool. That works pretty well. So those are some ways, and then you just put a bucket under it and open the drain, and that's how it would work. So Quaxy, that would help. It's not necessarily going to eliminate cannibalism, but it will help if they're well fed and they have plenty of water. So Wiggly Whiskers, an orange and red corn snake. Me too. I love the colors, and thanks for the advice on Christie's. You're welcome. Yep. Corn snakes are awesome. I get to feed our corn snake today, Wednesday's feeding day. And Mr. E. Finn, I just hope you don't get bitten. But I know you didn't get bitten last week, so that's good. Beetle King, is there any isopod that would be good for a desert sandy environment? I have a Kenyan sandbow. I don't think so, but I thought, why not ask? Well, let me tell you. I think it's a complicated answer, but I'm going to try to give you a simplified version of it. If you had an enclosure that were big enough to accommodate a separate microclimate, say you have a sandy, mossy area under a piece of cork bark on one side of the enclosure, and then the rest of the area is sandy and dry and actually has low humidity, so you're not jeopardizing the sandboa's health. You have both. You might be able to get away with it. Now, whether the isopods would actually go where they needed to go to do the cleaning up that they need to do is another question. But there are some species that do fairly well with an arid environment as long as they always have a moist retreat. So if the enclosure were big enough, you might be able to get away with it. But in the sizes of enclosures that most people keep Kenyan sandboas in, I'm not sure it would work. And Quaxy, I would move them into the adult crickets, or actually a third enclosure would be the best if you have that option. So Captain Obvious, thinking of an intermediate mantis species. Which species have you kept? I've only kept a couple of species, just the normal Chinese mantis and the Hierodula giant golden mantis, giant Asian golden mantis. Golden giant Asian? Oh, I can't remember how the order goes. But anyway, those are the only two species I've kept. Ooh, feather millipedes. I like those guys. What kind of dart frogs would you recommend to put in a 12 by 12 by 18 enclosure? I would look into the thumbnails because that's a pretty small enclosure, or just get one dart frog and not breed them. You could keep one in there if you make a lot of effective wall space it can use. But if you get thumbnails, you can totally breed thumbnails in there. I just don't have a lot of experience with thumbnails, but that is an enclosure a lot of people use for breeding thumbnails. And Slav Pepe, there are some beetles that make good cleanup crew for desert enclosures. With a Kenyan sandboa, you could probably use some of the desert beetles, possibly even blue death feigning beetles. People use them with desert hairy scorpions, so that's a very good point, Slav Pepe. And Abby Green. Yeah, I think Armadillidium klugi are going to be a little more risky to put in with a crested gecko. And it's also going to be too wet, most likely too humid. Because Armadillidium klugi like a really dry area, and crested geckos, they do need humidity spikes and humidity lows, but not as much as Armadillidium klugi. So I would say that might not work. In this vivarium, which I just I've been working on replanting in here. I put some Silisticus convexus to see how they're doing in there with a crested gecko, but it's too recent to know how well it's doing. Okay. Yeah, Captain Obvious, Darkling or Blue Death Fading Beetles might work. I would be interested to see. I haven't tried it, and I don't know. I know the snake would not be interested in eating Blue Death Fading Beetles, but would it disturb them too much? Would they disturb it, like Heather's saying? I'm not sure. And Quaxy, you're welcome. You know, watching helps too. I appreciate all donations, super chats, Patreon, whatever it is. But if you can't do it, I'm just happy to help you, and watching helps me. Just watching. So I appreciate that as well. And let's see. Okay, Captain Obvious. So you've set 3 different species of mantis. Okay, cool. Well, I wish I had some more advice for you. Ghost mantis is one that I want to try, and they're apparently quite easy from what I hear, and somewhat communal too. And Crystal, congrats on the mantis egg case hatching. That's what I did last year. We had mantis that is established here locally. We had an egg case, and most of them went back into the garden, but we had, I think I took in 3, and one of them passed away when they're young, which is not uncommon. And then one of them made it to the last molt, but then died, and then the other one survived into adulthood and did well. And I would say that wiggly whiskers, feather millipedes, and giant gold millipedes have very different requirements in that feather millipedes like a lot of very humid air, in my experience, and giant gold millipedes like it a little drier with more ventilation, so I'm not sure they would do super great together. Look at that, that's like a good portrait right there. So, hello, horrific dude. Are you able to handle these frogs? It's best not to, for their safety. They're sensitive to all kinds of things on our hands, from microorganisms potentially to just any oils that are in our hands, any residues of soaps or detergents that are on our hands. So it is best not to handle them. And I don't currently have any more centipedes, although we'll probably get another Scolopendra polymorpha now that are died. And thank you, Quaxy, for subbing. Captain Obvious kept roaches with a spotted python. Interesting. To ensure your viv is not a trafficked area of your house, or do the frogs not mind people passing by? This is actually in our living room, and this is a fairly bold species of frog. The Dendrobates leucomelis is one of the best beginner frogs, partly because they're a little more tolerant of temperature swings and humidity swings than others. Not super tolerant, but more so than many dart frogs. And they're also quite bold, and so they're not bothered by being in the living room. They're just fine. Yeah, when I have had to handle the frogs, to move them, I generally either use a container or I use gloves. But once, when I was moving some plants out, I accidentally took a frog out of the vivarium, and it was on the floor, and I grabbed it and tossed it in because I was worried that leaving it out any longer would be worse than picking it up, so I did that once. But generally, yeah, it's either a container so there's no contact with my hands, or gloved hands if I need to do that. Wiggly whiskers, that's some interesting information. The Kenyan sandboat would be afraid, huh? All right, oh, that's a pretty good view right there. Sorry the glare is so nasty today. I'm not sure if it's my angle or what's going on, but the glare is not awesome today. But still, the dart frogs are awesome today. Okay. Well, folks, I am just about to go because I need to film some more videos. And I need to feed snakes and things like that. So, any other final questions before I head out? Toilet Pete. Oh, my day's going pretty well. I'm enjoying hanging out with the frogs and with all of you. So and thank you, Ken. Thank you for joining in. I appreciate the support. And you're welcome, Wiggly Whiskers. And I will head out. I'll see you, and thank you, Heather, for the suggestion for the last minute likes. We've got more likes than viewers right now, so that's a good sign. And you're welcome, Beetle King. Please be sure to catch my next video on Friday, and have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy.